Okay, welcome in. I'm now going to be reviewing Week 2's action from the NFL season. Hard to believe already 2 weeks in. Luckily, there's still 16 more weeks to go, so there's plenty of football left in this season. So the Thursday matchup took place in Buffalo, and the Bills went into Miami. They would win big, 31-10, but the big news from that game was obviously Tua getting another concussion, and it's not looking good for him and for the Dolphins. I'm sure they're a little worried about his health. He's for sure not starting Week 3, and we'll see if and when he comes back this season. There's a very good chance they could just put him on the injured reserve for the rest of the season, because 3 concussions, especially in 2 years, it's not looking good. And obviously, with the big thing with concussions is it has a long-term effect. So if he decides to play still for another 10 years or however long he plays in the NFL, he may not have any side effects then, but maybe in 15 years, 20 years, whatever it is, then the brain can obviously take a lot of trauma from being rattled around so much. And obviously football is one of a couple of sports that are pretty violent, and there are very likely that it's a very high chance that you can come away with, like I said, a very serious injury. So I'm sure the Dolphins are doing anything and everything they can to make sure he's in perfect health. And again, depending on how severe it is, he's likely out long term, possibly for the entire season. And if that's the case, then the Dolphins' chances of getting into the postseason just went downhill, because it looks like the Bills are on a bit of a roll after winning 2 straight games. So I did pick Buffalo in this game. So far, I was 1 for 1 on Week 2 of my predictions. The next one was an upset in Baltimore, as the Ravens played host to the Las Vegas Raiders. 26-23, I apologize, would be the final score. I did pick the Ravens to win this one, but unfortunately it was not meant to be. The last time they started 0-2 was in the 2015-16 seasons. That was roughly 8 or 9 years ago. And obviously it's not where they want to be. They want to get back to that AFC Championship game and possibly a Super Bowl, so it's not a very good start, but there are still 15 games remaining in these years, so we'll see how they do. Or I think there's 16 games left, if I'm not mistaken. Anyways, one of the two. So the Raiders are now 1-1. The Ravens, as I mentioned before, are 0-2. So I was 1-1 so far. The next matchup took place in Carolina, as the Panthers played host to the Los Angeles Chargers. This was a blowout, 26-3 in favor of LA. They have now improved to 2-0. I did pick them as well. And the Saints are still winless, 0-2. The big thing that came away from this matchup was Bryce Young has been benched, and I believe Andy Dalton will be starting for the Carolina Panthers in week number 3. What I thought was going to be the game of the week turned out to be an absolute blowout, as the New Orleans Saints went into Dallas to take on the Cowboys. The Saints blew out the Cowboys in their own arena. 44-19 would be the final score. So after the Cowboys stomped their week 1 opponent, they got absolutely crushed at home, and it didn't look too promising, as the Saints look legit. I think they could be a very serious contender to make the playoffs. As long as they can stay healthy and stay consistent, this is going to be a very dangerous team this year. I did pick the Cowboys, so I think after this game, I went back to 2-2. A rematch of last year's wildcard game in Detroit, as the Lions played host to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I did predict that Tampa would win, only because I thought they'd want to have a little bit of revenge after losing the wildcard game last year, and they sure did. 20-16 would be the final score. The Bucs have improved to 2-0. The Lions are 1-1. Off to Lambeau, as the Green Bay Packers played host to the Indianapolis Colts. A very low-scoring game. 16-10 would be the final score in favor of the Packers. They didn't have Jordan Love. I think they had Mark Willis, if I'm not mistaken, as their starting quarterback. And I also did pick Indy to win this one, so not the best start when it came to my predictions. So the Packers are 1-1, and the Colts are still winless, 0-2. The next game took place in Jacksonville, as the Jaguars played host to the Cleveland Browns. I did pick Jacksonville to win this one, and the craziest thing is they lost 18-13. The last time they won a game was last year in Week 12. Since then, they've been 0-7. Hard to believe for a team that won the division 2 years ago and looked like they should be contenders year in and year out, with Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson as the quarterback and head coach tandem, but it's not looking too good at the beginning of this season. For the Browns, obviously they got their first win of the season. They're now 1-1. They're now in second place, I do believe, in that AFC North. A huge upset in Minneapolis as the Minnesota Vikings would win 23-17 over the San Francisco 49ers. For the Vikings, they're 2-0 on the season. For the 49ers, they're now 1-1 on the season. And for a team that should be and possibly can still be Super Bowl contenders, the 49ers aren't looking like themselves. And the big news out of the 49ers side is that Christian McCaffrey has been sidelined for at least 5 or 6 weeks. So when you lose your big running back, your big star, it definitely hurts your team's chances of winning. So we'll see if they can get back on track and get a bit of a winning streak before he comes back in the lineup, because if they start going on a 2 or 3 game losing streak, by the time he comes back, they could be looking up in the standings. And I should say I did pick San Fran to win this game, but they didn't. An overtime game in New England as the Patriots played host to the Seattle Seahawks. 23-20 would be the final score in favor of the Seahawks. I did predict that Seattle would win. I didn't think it would go to overtime, but they sure did get the victory, and they have now improved to 2-0 on the season. The Patriots are 1-1 after the loss. The New York Jets went into Tennessee to take on the Titans. 24-17 would be the final score in favor of the Jets. I did have them winning, getting their first win of the season. And I seen this one stat the other day, or last night, I believe. And for Aaron Rodgers, because obviously he got traded to the Jets 2 seasons ago, it was over like 600 days in between wins from his last game since his last win with the Packers, and then his first win with the New York Jets. So a long time for Aaron Rodgers to get a win as a starting quarterback. And for the Jets, they got their first win of the season as well. They are 1-1. For the Titans, they have now dropped to 0-2. And I got to admit, I was a little surprised, but happy that the coach for the Titans called out the quarterback. It's been 2 consecutive weeks where Will Levis has cost his team points and potentially winning games. So good on the coach for sticking to his guns. A lot of people might think it's like a coach shouldn't do that because he's always supposed to have his players back. But if you give a chance to watch the replay, like, he shouldn't have tried to throw a lateral to the running back because the running back wasn't even expecting it. If anything, just take the sack, and at least you can possibly kick a field goal if you can't advance the ball. But unfortunately, it was not meant to be, so the Titans are still winless on the season. An interesting game between 2 NFC East foes as the Washington Commanders took the field against the New York Giants. I did predict that Washington would win this game, and the wild thing is that the Giants scored, I think, like 3 touchdowns, got 18 points, and the Commanders got no touchdowns, and they got 21 points. Think about how that makes any sense. So imagine getting 3 touchdowns, you score them, and yet you still lose the game, and you don't even give up a touchdown on the other side. So it's mind-blowing of how terrible the Giants really are, and that contract for Daniel Jones, I'll say this over and over again until he can prove me wrong, it's looking very, very bad. All right, speaking of division foes, the Arizona Cardinals were playing host to the Los Angeles Rams. I did pick Arizona to win, but I didn't think it was going to be a blowout the way it was. 41-10 would be the final score. The Cardinals picked up their first win of the season. They're now at 1-1, while the Rams are still winless at 0-2. My beloved Broncos played host to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I did bet against my team, and it's a good thing I did. It was a low-scoring game. 13-6 would be the final score. The Broncos have still yet to have a passing touchdown. I think Bo Nix got a running touchdown in their Week 1 game against the Seahawks. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on this quarterback and this team to try to improve, because I think I said this in videos in the past that there should be optimism moving forward with this team. They're young, and they obviously have a veteran coach and a Hall of Fame or future Hall of Fame coach at their helm, but he can only do so much. So we'll see how they do in week number 3. I don't really like their chances. And I remember seeing this one little stat before the season started. They said the Broncos would be lucky if they get to like 4 or 5 wins. Well, the way they're playing, I kind of agree with that. They have to improve. Their defense isn't bad. They only gave up 13 points. So if you're giving up less than 20 points a game, you should be, right there in the thick of things, maybe force overtime, whatever it is. But if you only get 2 field goals in 60 minutes, it shows a lot about how inconsistent their offense really is. So the Steelers have improved to 2-0. And then I read this article about how the Steelers gave Russell Wilson the spite ball obviously because the Broncos let him go in the offseason. So I'm sure he would have loved to have played against his former team, but Justin Fields got the starting nod. But good on the Steelers for getting to 2-0 on the season. I don't think anybody saw that coming. A heartbreaking game if you're a Bengals fan, as you went into Kansas City, and before they played this game, Patrick Mahomes only beat Joe Burrow's Bengals one time in the tenure of the two of them duking it out over the past 3 or 4 seasons. But in the end, Mahomes would get the last laugh, as I think Harrison Butker kicked like a 51-yard field goal with no time remaining. 26-25 would be the final score. I did predict the Chiefs would win. You can't really bet against the Chiefs when they're back-to-back Super Bowl champions and they're trying to three-peat. The Sunday night game took place in Houston as the Texans played host to the Chicago Bears. 19-13 would be the final score, and I have to make a correction from when I made my prediction. I said that these were 2 number 1 quarterbacks that were drafted a year apart. CJ Stroud was drafted number 2 in the 2023 draft, so I screwed up on that because I'm pretty sure Bryce Young was the number 1 pick, and obviously Caleb Williams was the number 1 pick for the Chicago Bears. He hasn't looked that great, but it's only been 2 games in his career, so maybe we'll see how they do. But for the Bears, they're 1-1, and for the Texans, I believe they are 2-0, still perfect on the season. Last night's game, a nail biter as well. For the Falcons and the Eagles, I did think the Eagles would pull this one out, and they almost did. But unfortunately, I think it was a 3rd down play where Jalen Hurts threw the ball to Saquon Barkley. He wasn't able to grab the ball, and it ended up being an incomplete pass. They kicked a field goal, and then the Falcons, with like a minute and a half, went down and scored the touchdown, and then the extra point ended up being the game winner. 22-21 would be the final score. So for my week 2 predictions, I went 11-5. 13-3 in the first week, so that brings my total to 25-8 on the season so far. Not too shabby, but I would love to try to stay consistent with like 12 or 13 wins. But again, my predictions can only go so far. Anyways, that takes care of my recap for week number 2 of this NFL season. As always, if you're new to this channel and you like this type of content, feel free to hit the sub button. I'd be very grateful and very appreciative. Until next time, and as always, take care.